At the company picnic, my supervisor shouted, "Don't worry about her, she's basically our mascot. She smiles, she nods, she does whatever we say." Everyone laughed as he raised his beer and added, "It's cute, really. Watch, hey, sit, girl." I smiled, sat exactly where I was, pulled out my phone, and played a recording of him admitting to falsifying reports. In front of the entire executive team. I've never been the loud one in the room. I'm not the type to fight for attention or make scenes. I work hard, I keep my head down, and I've always believed that doing good work should be enough. But I learned the hard way, it's not. Not in some places. I'm 35, single, and have been working in corporate finance for most of my adult life. I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's not flashy, but it's home. I own a modest house, have a dog named Roscoe, and spend most of my free time in peace. At least, I did. Until Brent made it impossible to stay quiet anymore. Brent was my supervisor. Tall guy, early 40s, always acting like he had all the answers. You know the type. Wore shiny shoes, leaned back in his chair like he owned the building, and talked to people like they were beneath him. He wasn't brilliant, but he was loud and confident. That got him farther than it should have. I worked in the same department with him for 6 years. I handled senior-level reporting, mainly for quarterly analysis and executive forecasting. Brent had been there just a year longer than me, but he never let me forget that. He started with small comments. Smiley, he called me. It was his nickname for me. Because you're always smiling and nodding. I didn't think much of it at first. Seemed harmless, if annoying. But it didn't stop there. He'd say things like, "You're like a puppy. Loyal, happy, and easy." In meetings, he'd interrupt me and say, "Let Smiley handle it, she doesn't mind." The worst part? People laughed. Not all of them, but enough to make it feel like I was the weird one for being bothered. Then there were the assignments. I'd be given piles of grunt work. Weekend updates. Last-minute presentation drafts. It was always me. "She's reliable," he'd say. "She won't complain." But I started noticing something off in our reports. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. I was reviewing one of the Q1 sales projections and saw numbers that didn't match the actuals in our source files. I double-checked. Then triple-checked. Someone had edited the spreadsheet. I confronted Brent. I walked into his office, closed the door, and asked if he'd updated the numbers. He didn't even blink. "Of course I did," he said. "Do you think we're going to keep our funding with the real numbers? This is how the game works. Don't be soft." I stood there stunned. "That's fraud." He chuckled. "Relax. It's not like we're stealing money. We're just shaping the story." I didn't argue. I nodded and walked out. But from that day forward, I started documenting everything. Every adjusted spreadsheet. Every Slack message where he asked me to tweak data. Every email where he hinted that our story has to match the narrative. And I started recording conversations. Indiana's a one-party consent state. That means I don't need his permission. I knew I'd need hard proof if I ever wanted to report him, and if I reported him without it, he'd crush me. I wasn't going to give him that chance. I didn't tell anyone. Not even the coworker I trusted most. I kept doing my job, kept being Smiley. I let him think I was still that harmless, obedient little employee who wouldn't dare cross him. Then came the company picnic. It was in July, one of those overly cheerful forced fun events. They held it at a public park near downtown. It was sunny, hot, and full of people trying to pretend they weren't tired of each other. The whole executive team was there. Our CEO flew in from Chicago. Brent had already been drinking when I arrived. I spotted him near the beer tent, holding court like always. He had a beer in one hand and his arm around one of the junior analysts, laughing too loud. I grabbed a plate of food and found a spot on the grass. I figured I'd stay an hour and leave. But Brent had other plans. Someone near him, maybe one of the sales guys, asked how our department was able to hit all our numbers even during the bad quarters. Brent grinned, pointed toward me, and said, loud enough for the entire group to hear, "Don't worry about her, she's basically our mascot. She smiles, she nods, she does whatever we say." There was this awkward pause. Then laughter. Nervous, some of it. Real from a few. Brent wasn't done. "It's cute, really," he said. Then he raised his beer and shouted, "Watch, hey, sit, girl." People turned to look at me. I didn't move. I didn't frown. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and pressed play. Brent's voice filled the air. If corporates saw what I really submit, they'd shit themselves. But they don't ask questions when the numbers look good. It's all smoke and mirrors. Dead silence. Brent turned red. "What the hell is that?" I stood up and looked straight at the VP of Finance, who was standing 10 feet away holding a plate of ribs. "Would you like to hear more?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just stared. I turned back to Brent. "I've got 6 months of recordings. Emails. Messages. Want to talk about smoke and mirrors now?" People were frozen. No one laughed. And that was only the beginning. After that moment, everything changed. People scattered. Some awkwardly shuffled away with their drinks. A few stood there stunned. Brent tried to laugh it off. "She's joking, right?" he said, raising his voice, trying to sound casual. "Come on, Smiley, tell them you're messing around." I didn't respond. I looked at the VP of Finance, his name's Carl. He looked older than usual. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, then said, "Email me everything. Tonight." Brent's eyes snapped to him. But Carl cut him off. "Not here." I left right after that. I didn't eat a single bite of the food I'd picked up. I went straight home and spent the next 6 hours organizing everything. I had folders by month. Labeled conversations. Highlighted spreadsheets. Every line that had been changed, every memo that proved Brent was not just careless, he was deliberate. I emailed the full package to Carl at 1:14 a.m. Then I emailed a copy to HR. Then I printed a full copy and locked it in a drawer. I didn't sleep much. Monday morning, Brent didn't show up to the office. Tuesday, a company-wide meeting was scheduled. Virtual, mandatory, with a vague title, Operational Integrity Update. At exactly 10 a.m., Carl came on the screen. He looked tired. Serious. "We have received credible internal reports of data manipulation," he said. "Effective immediately, Brent Mitchell has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. We will be conducting a full audit." That was it. No further detail. But the office? Oh, the office exploded. People whispered in the hallways. Slack messages flew back and forth. Some asked me outright, "Was that you?" I didn't answer. Later that week, HR called me in for an interview. I brought everything, copies of emails, voice recordings, and timestamped spreadsheet versions. I laid it all out like a prosecutor. The HR manager, Diane, looked at me after an hour of going through it all and said, "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" I just smiled. "Would you have listened?" She didn't answer. The investigation dragged on for 3 weeks. During that time, something weird started happening. A few people, folks I barely spoke to, started treating me differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others went out of their way to be nice. Then I got pulled into another meeting. This time, it wasn't just HR. Carl was there. So was the company's legal counsel. They asked me if I would be willing to talk to the board. Apparently, Brent had done more than just mess with a few reports. The audit showed long-term manipulation, over a year of padded numbers. Bonuses had been paid out on false performance. Promotions had been tied to those fake results. And now it wasn't just about Brent. Carl looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We think some people higher up knew. Or should have known. We need to know if you're willing to testify." That hit hard. This wasn't just about Brent anymore. This was about people who signed off on his numbers. People who ignored warning signs. People who let someone like him have power, and pretended it was harmless when he mocked and humiliated others. I said yes. But I had no idea what that decision was going to cost me. I thought things would get better once Brent was out. That maybe the hard part was done. I was wrong. A week after I agreed to speak to the board, I noticed something strange. One of the IT guys, Jeff, stopped me in the hallway and said, real quiet, "Hey, just so you know, someone's been trying to access your work email from outside the network." I flagged it. That made my stomach twist. "Who?" I asked. He hesitated. "Can't say for sure. But it was blocked. I just wanted you to be careful." I thanked him. Went back to my desk. Locked everything down, changed passwords, turned on two-factor, the whole deal. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes. You just nuked your own career." No name. No signature. Just that. I didn't respond. But I saved the message and reported it to HR. They logged it. Promised to look into it. But there was no follow-up. No action. Nothing. A few days later, someone from payroll emailed me asking to confirm details about my Q2 report. Odd, because that was Brent's responsibility, not mine. When I opened the shared drive to check the files, a folder I created months ago, where I kept early versions of reports, was gone. Completely deleted. I knew I hadn't touched it. I went to IT again. Jeff checked the logs. "Someone accessed your account through a backdoor admin tool," he said. It was someone with high-level access. That's when I realized this went deeper than I thought. Brent wasn't just acting alone. Someone was trying to erase what he did. And now that I was the one who brought it all out, I was the problem they wanted gone. A week before I was supposed to speak to the board, I got called into a meeting with HR again. This time, Diane looked stiff. Nervous, even. "We've had a complaint filed against you," she said. "Several, actually." "What kind of complaint?" "Hostile behavior. Creating a toxic work environment. Threatening your supervisor." I almost laughed. "You mean the one on leave for falsifying data?" She didn't smile. I kept calm. "I've got every conversation recorded. Every file. If you're planning to build a case against me, you'd better bring more than hearsay." She didn't say much after that. Just closed her folder and said, "You'll still be expected to testify." I walked out of there angry, but I was done playing defense. That night, I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a woman named Marisol who used to work in internal compliance for a Fortune 100 company. I told her everything. Gave her all the files. She took it seriously from the first word. "You think they'll try to pin this on you?" she asked. "I think they already started." She nodded. "Then we hit first. You're not just a witness now. You're a whistleblower." A week later, with her help, I filed a formal whistleblower complaint against the company. And that's when all hell broke loose. The moment my whistleblower complaint hit, everything changed. Meetings stopped. Emails got short and cold. People avoided me in the halls. I was moved off all client-facing reports temporarily, but no one would say why. I heard whispers. I knew some folks were angry. Not because I was wrong, but because I made a mess they could no longer ignore. My lawyer, Marisol, kept telling me, this is how they play. They want to scare you into backing off. But I didn't. 2 weeks later, I sat in front of the board. It was a closed-door meeting in a glass conference room on the 17th floor. Carl was there. So was the company's internal counsel. And 5 board members, none of whom I'd ever spoken to before that day. I told them everything. Slowly. With documents and recordings to back it all up. I showed them how Brent had faked numbers. How others had signed off. How warnings were ignored. I played the audio clips, including the one where Brent bragged, "They'll never touch me. Everyone at the top wants clean numbers. I just give them what they want." When I finished, no one said anything for a long time. Then one of the board members, an older woman named Jean, leaned forward and said, "Do you know what this will do to our stock if it gets out?" I didn't flinch. "Do you know what it will do if you cover it up?" That was the last thing I said before I walked out. 3 days later, the press release hit the wire. Internal audit reveals misconduct by former executive. Independent review to follow. Brent was officially terminated. But it didn't stop there. 2 directors retired early. Carl was reassigned. Diane from HR took a leave of absence for personal reasons. And me? I was offered a quiet payout to leave the company. A 6-month severance, signed NDA, and a reference letter. They thought I'd take it and disappear. I didn't. I declined. Filed a retaliation claim instead. Turns out the deleted folders, the fake complaints, the backdoor email access, that's not just shady. It's illegal. My lawyer brought in federal labor authorities. Things got real, fast. In the months that followed, more dominoes fell. The company paid a fine. They issued revised earnings to shareholders. Brent tried to sue me for defamation, but my proof made that case disappear before it reached court. Last I heard, he moved to Texas and was working freelance, far from anything involving numbers. But it wasn't all victory for me either. I left the company. I had to. The atmosphere became unbearable. Even with truth on my side, people looked at me like I broke something sacred. I moved to Indianapolis, started fresh in a new job at a smaller firm where ethics actually meant something. I still don't smile as much in the office. I'm polite. I do my work. But when my new boss asked me in passing why I left my last job, I told him one thing: some people thought I was just a mascot. I showed them I wasn't. And he just nodded.